For those of you tuning in, you were seeing a prop that we stopped, so Mike can go grab the prop.
I mean, this is kind of, I didn't know that something that was just getting started could already break.
It's oil specific, and people have pointed that out. Hey, you know, Apple makes 20 billion or more a year in California.
Okay, and we are back again for another live Energy Facts Chats. Mike, let's first off, everyone out there tuning in, thank you so much for tuning in to Energy Facts Chats live. And this is kind of something that Mike and I have been doing. So if you enjoy these conversations about kind of getting the everyday energy headlines in 20 to 30 minutes, head over to if you can do us a favor, head over to our YouTube channel. Mike, as you can see, it's growing by a couple subscribers.
Cool.
Head over to YouTube channel and subscribe there. That way you get alerts whenever we do go live, because this is kind of something that Mike and I are enjoying doing. We enjoy talking energy. We live, breathe, eat energy, and we can't sleep. We send each other energy articles, which is kind of sad, but that's where we're at. But anyway,
hey, you love what you do, right?
Head over to our YouTube channel, subscribe to that, and honestly, and what again, a common theme what we're talking about is, you know, oftentimes, you know, although these are energy headlines specific to the day, they tie into a greater energy story, a greater energy dialogue that we've been having. And just interesting to kind of see the headlines kind of tack on to these stories and kind of see where it evolves. And the whole goal of this is to kind of bridge energy expectations with energy realities. Hey, this is what we should be doing. This is what we want to do in 10 years. But what's the reality of that? Who does it really affect? Is it the local consumers? Is it the environment? What is going on? So Mike, how are you today, buddy? You're outside.
Great. Good morning.
You're outside. I'm outside.
I'm outside.
I
got home at 1 a.m. from Bakersfield, so I'm like, I need to be out in nature.
This looks like a green screen, doesn't it?
That's beautiful
good.
Where you're at. It does look like a fake backdrop, Zoom backdrop or whatever.
It's not. It's not. I went to an oil field golf tournament last night after I landed back in from Denver and just saw some people, and it was a good little time. Nothing too crazy. So Mike, we got some news going on today. Is that true or false?
That's true. Every day. I'm wondering if you're going to have us working on weekends too. So maybe we take the weekends off from here.
I'll tell you what. Let's hit up the headlines, and I kind of want to get a debrief on after you see how the first week went. How about that?
Okay.
Let's hit up the headlines for those that are people that want to kind of tune in.
Yeah, let's start with one that we've been following on this California proposal to allow the state to buy power. And we've talked about this the past several days as articles keep coming out about this bill for the state to procure clean energy, specifically wind and geothermal have been referenced. But what I wanted to note in here was that the California Senate voted Thursday to give Democratic Governor Newsom administration permission to buy massive amounts of electricity, a move that is aimed at avoiding blackouts by shoring up the state's power supply while jumpstarting the West Coast's fledgling offshore wind industry. And I don't know how you can call it fledgling. They've had some offshore leases on the blocks of offshore, territory where they're going to put these wind farms offshore. Companies paid roughly $750 million last year for those lease areas, according to this article.
Okay.
But what we also saw early in the week was several articles about Ørsted pulling out.
How wind is failing, how it's not generating returns, how there's supply issues, there's material issues. There's now people need more. It's not returning, so now they're going for an increased 10% tax incentive. So there's a lot of stuff going on with the offshore wind market. Yes, okay.
Yeah, but to say West Coast fledgling offshore wind, it's the whole international offshore wind industry is fledgling.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important little piece.
We covered that. But real quick, Mike, can you kind of back this up for me? Kind of give me the 30,000 view and explain this to me like I'm 5 years old on what this means about buying power, future power. What are you talking about?
So, and I've been wondering how the state was going to pay for it. Is the Energy Commission going to pay for it? This is through the Department of Water Resources, I believe. Are they going to pay for this generation?
Okay.
But what it says is the state's largest utility companies have not been willing to commit to buying power from projects like those, the
Why?
offshore wind, because it would cost too much money and take too long to build. In addition to building the wind turbines, the projects would require improvements at the state's ports and new power lines to transport the energy from the ocean to the land. And it goes on to state the money would come from a surcharge imposed on Californians' electricity bills. State regulators would decide how much this charge would be. Consumers would not pay it until the wind projects are up and running. So that means the state's going to have to front the upfront build for this, which is likely several years from now. And so this is interesting to me because I've had neighbors, friends tell me, hey, I put solar panels on my roof because
Right.
I was told I would not have an electricity bill. Or I'm buying an EV because I get a subsidy or I get a credit on my utility bill.
Right.
Well, what this is saying goes against this mainstream narrative that I think the common person or even the 5-year-old that's told, hey, you're going to get this toy for free. Oh, I want that toy. And it's not free. Nothing's ever free, particularly when you have very expensive deep water offshore wind.
So pretty much you're gonna get this toy for free now. However, whenever you're 13, you start kind of mowing lawns and all this stuff. Actually, you're gonna start buying this toy right now, even if you're trying to save up for the Xbox 980 or the latest VR thing. That probably costs a lot more just through cost of living or inflation, or
you're gonna pay for it.
The cost of power. You're gonna be paying for this in 5 years. So you sure you want this now? We sure about that? So regardless what we decide, you're gonna be paying for this.
Yeah,
right?
You're paying. The
Okay.
consumer is paying, regardless if you've got solar panels on your roof or not. The utility ratepayers in the state are going to be paying for that expensive, prohibitively expensive at this moment in time, source of generation.
So you got the subsidies for the EV chargers going to the lower income places. Okay, you have that proposal where it kind of your bill is based off of the income per household, right?
Income surcharge.
You have this now, which is actually floating the cost back to the consumer. So it seems like all these great programs that are coming out in California, it seems, people are saying, oh, who's funding this? Who's funding this? At the end of the day, you are. It's the taxpayer that's going to be funding all these, whether it's the oil czar, when there's 7 permits out in California, whether it's buying power, it's going to be back to the consumer. So everything's getting pushed to the consumer. So that free energy now is probably not going to be that nominal amount in 5-10 years, whatever it is. It's probably going to be increased just because the cost of energy with poor energy policy is going to be a lot higher.
Yeah, and what people have been told over the last 5, 10, 15 years is that solar and wind are cheaper and they're going to bring your costs down. And that's not the case. And so I think you're going to see a boomerang in the media where you can't not report things like this. You have, because I've been wondering this whole week, who's paying for this? It hasn't really been laid out there. Well, now we see the money would come from a surcharge imposed on Californians' electricity bill. Not some, but it just says all Californians here. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, number one, and it's going to be interesting to see how much this increases our utility bills, which are already the highest in the country, maybe outside of Hawaii, but the highest in the country.
Okay, so let me pull that article back up. So this is talk about this. Like, I'm not understanding. Like, so what kind of power whenever stuff like this comes out, whenever it's like an election year, whenever things are kind of this and all that stuff, the promise of doing this and all that stuff. So is this kind of like one of those things where it's kind of like, is this kind of smoke and mirrors ploy where it's like, hey, we're going to buy future power so it stays cheaper and all that? I mean, what is the purpose of buying this power in advance?
I think the purpose, if we assume good intentions from the politicians, I think the politicians are trying to figure out, okay, we've set aggressive mandates, targets to be 100% zero emission electricity generation in California by 2045. Now, how do we get there? And they've been told by lobbyists and wind proponents, hey, wind is the way to go. You need to push offshore wind. that's not the case, and now you have a lot of momentum going in that direction, but we're seeing the real life implications on the East Coast and internationally that the technology is just not there yet. And that's basically what this article said as well, is that, hey, California is going to have to front the cost of this once everything's connected, hooked up, built, all that, transmission lines, then we're going to start charging it back to the ratepayer. And that's how it works. And so I think it just goes to the fact that we need more diverse sources of clean energy. We're not going to make this happen with offshore wind in California alone. Maybe not even a little bit.
Real quick, I want to kind of tie this up and move on because we have several others to hit up. So do you feel that this is kind of the mindset? Just look at a lot of these projects. It's like, hey, if we throw enough money at this, the technology will get there regardless. Like if we put enough money towards these projects, put enough money towards this, the technology is going to get there with enough money.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a part of the mindset from regulators and agencies that, to innovate, you've got to spend a lot of money on R&D and
so at the end of the day, regardless, if we put enough money towards it, it's going to take care of itself. And that money comes from somewhere. Okay, so let's move on. All right, let's move on. What do we hit up next? What
I thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting to see that U.S. contacts oil producers and refiners as gasoline prices rise, when we know that federally and locally here for us, it's the same narrative that, wait, we don't control the prices as operators. We're price takers. And this is really, it goes back to what we talk about a lot of, we need everything. We need all of the above, and we need permits to grow production. We need permits to expand refinery capacity if that would ever happen. But we need permits for pipelines. But we know that the Biden administration has shut down large swaths of Alaska from the headlines we've read this week. We know they shut down Keystone XL pipeline early in the days of day one of the administration. And that's not to say we need to be all pro fossil fuel expansion, but in times like these, I think it's important for the industry to just issue those friendly reminders. Hey, we're trying. In California, we've got 1,400 permits. We're trying.
Yeah, but it's also, to me, it's one of those things where it's like, when it comes to energy, unfortunately, sources of energy have become politicized, this versus that, we got to go this way versus that way. And it's gotten to the environment where you're right. There has been a big administrative push to shut down. You see it right there. 3 years ago, you had 1,400 permits, and now you have 7 in the state of California that consumes consistently 600 million barrels of oil a year. Right. So you have this negative rhetoric, you have, this squeezing of an industry, whether you like it or not. And then whenever families do start feeling that pinch, whenever gas starts going up, whenever it is an election year, whatever this or that, then it's like, hey, the U.S. is asking it's like, I feel that's kind of a little bit past the point. It's like, I think we should probably be having a conversation before this squeeze occurs, before this pinch point is felt by a lot of different families. Right. So rather than, poo-pooing on an energy source and then saying, hey, look, at the end of the day, we kind of need y'all to help us out a little more. Let's start working together more and realize that energy is energy for everyone. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And we're seeing it. I think we put the headline out there. I'm not sure, but prices of diesel are now impacting other sectors. And we talked about that earlier in the week as well, that fuel prices are soaring. Who is feeling the pinch? And it talks about home builders, truckers, grocery stores, all the things we talk about, that this economy in the United States is run on diesel. This economy in California, importing 40% of the country's imports, is run on diesel. And we're trying to shut down production. So the feedstock to the refineries to refine the product to make diesel is coming from international regions. Specifically Saudi Arabia and Russia have been cited in the Wall Street Journal as feedstocks that are great for making diesel. So these diesel prices now are coming back into the inflation story, which of course we've talked about. Core inflation excludes energy and food. But for me and you and our kids and our families, there is no core inflation, not core inflation. There's, oh my gosh, these are all my bills and I'm paying
more.
for them.
So I guess to summarize, so if this Topo Chico bottle last year when energy prices were low, the cost diesel was low, to ship this to me would cost $1.
Yeah,
right?
maybe.
However, if the just go with me.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
with me here. All right.
It's an example.
I'm the guy.
Yes.
I'm the guy that provides the explain like I'm five. However, if the cost to make this increases, the cost to ship this increases, the Uber surcharge to ship this to me increases, and all that stuff. That means that this is not going to be $1 to me anymore. This is going to be at $2. So I'm going to be feeling the pain of this. So whenever cost of diesel goes up, whenever cost, oh well, why don't we just go electrified and all that stuff? Because currently today, if I'm paying my September bills, I'm not worried about electrification in 10 years. I'm worried about September bills, right? So it all ties in together and all affects the consumer's bills at the end of the month.
1000%. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you can't escape that reality, whatever you label the category of inflation.
So what does it say? Let's move on after. What does it say? Who is feeling the pinch? Is this everyone? Is this all industries? Is this consumers? Who's feeling the pinch?
The article basically sets up the fact that it's anybody moving lumber, so it's going to affect the building industry. It's anybody moving construction products as a category. It's anybody moving groceries. Anybody moving, It's the movement of goods is becoming more costly, and so that bleeds into anything that's moved by diesel, and that can extend to rail too. I mean, railroads are not electrified in the States always, so it's a big problem. It's a big problem, and you see people on EFT and Twitter, and they talk about it. Inflation's not going anywhere if the price of oil is shooting up to $100 a barrel again. It's just it's not going anywhere, and now you've got that plays into how the Federal Reserve thinks about increasing interest rates and trying to tamp down inflation.
Unfortunately, it stinks because it's 2023, we're coming to election year, and it seems like in election years, like people, what is it? They shoot themselves in the foot. They trip over a dollar to save a dime. There's irrational decisions when it comes to short-term managing the economy, short-term managing energy to get the election results you want. So it's gonna be interesting times. There's gonna be some interesting fact chats coming up in the next couple months, next year or so.
Absolutely.
I mean,
it's
gonna be interesting.
It is, and I think the election year presents an opportunity for education if the industry can remove itself from political rhetoric and just talk rationally and without emotion. And I think these last two articles are perfect examples. On Europe's EV troubles run deeper than China. That whole article was about, hey, is China providing subsidies to its EV manufacturers to basically unfairly punish the European car makers?
Well, they talked about that. They talked about that. They're talking about that. Even so many companies have gone out of business. EV company, I think over 400 EV companies in China have gone out of business. They're still moving forward with the mass production of EV batteries, EV cars, that stuff, and some say to manipulate the market.
Right, a manipulated market. And I think what people need to remind themselves is China's a communist country. China's going to do what's best for
China,
the regime in China. They're not worried about the EU. They're not worried about us. And I think that is an important reminder that as President Biden, put the IRA, in front of the American people and said, hey, we're going to source battery minerals and all these critical minerals locally. I support that. I think, if you're going to have a transition, we can't just be dependent on a communist regime or a place like Saudi Arabia on our oil. I think it's all related, and we need to start looking at everything we can do to support local businesses, domestic businesses, and economic competition.
Yeah, I dig that. So where are we going with this?
Well, the last one was, I think it's front page here, and it's a big story on Exxon's inside Exxon's climate two-step. Oil giants' public stance differed from internal strategy in Tillerson era. This one it's I think, I don't know, maybe not everybody's familiar with the reporting that Exxon identified back in the 70s that carbon emissions have an impact on the climate, on the temperature
Right.
globally. When you read through this article, it states in there Exxon had disagreements internally about to what extent do humans cause warming. Is it 10%? Is it 90%? And I think it's an important conversation to have, but my personal belief is that it's framed in the wrong way.
What do you mean?
It's framed in this way of like, let's paint Exxon and these big oil giants as world killers, that we don't look at any of the benefits that they bring to society, to what, the hoodie I'm wearing, anything, traveling. We all talk about these things, getting places. But I think it's missing an opportunity to actually force Exxon and big oil companies to improve their operations. And
which is what you're seeing, though. You're seeing all that.
Seeing what?
The improvement of operations when it comes to emissions, when it comes to monitoring this, when it comes to reporting. I mean, you are seeing improvements, but yes, there's always areas for improvement, 110%.
But I question those, and I'm critical about these things. But let's take flaring, for example. Why are we not, as a country, as a world, saying let's stop the flaring? We know that methane is 80 times the warming force in the atmosphere,
right? CO2,
and carbon. So why don't? And I think it's this mainstream media chasing carbon emissions rather than, hey, let's eliminate flaring. At least in the country, we can do that here. What does that mean for the operators? Hey, they need to push for more pipeline infrastructure. They need to plan for their projects to handle the gas that's coming out of these wells rather than venting and flaring. Secondly to that, let's push all these companies to abandon idle wells and remediate environmental issues.
Yeah,
because
that's been a hot topic for a while now.
Yeah, it's a hot topic for a while. But what I see is, there's this hyper focus on carbon emissions that we don't know what proportion we impact, the anthropogenic, the human force of that. We don't know if it's 10%, 20%, 30%, 90%, but we do know that idle wells need to go away. We do know that flaring needs to stop. We do know that there's certain practices that can be.
So why not focus on the stuff we do know versus spend all this time in conversation and path and direction towards the stuff that we don't know? Is that what you're saying? Let's handle the low hanging fruit. Let's handle the low hanging fruit that we do know as a fact versus this broad, vague subject of like, oh, is it this? Is it that? I feel like we're kind of like wasting a lot of time and energy talking about that. Let's go handle the stuff that we do know.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it also gives massive companies cover, to implement carbon trading schemes, to move into carbon business models and pass down these legacy issues or sell them off to independents that can't handle the responsibility. So I think that there's a missed opportunity to better the industry while we're trying to address carbon emissions. I think there's a lot more important, meaningful work that needs to be done first. Okay. That's just an opinion, though. So
I like that opinion, and I think another opinion too is like, it's so funny. It's like, oh, big oil's responsible for this. Oh, big oil's responsible for that. That's like, for me, yes, obviously there's a lot of benefits and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like you're living in the system, bro. Like, right. You're the one that consumes too. You use probably Amazon. You probably drive this. You probably like. It's not big. It's a consumer thing. So consume less. If you want to really kind of reduce your environmental footprint, consume less. That's the only way you're gonna. That's the only way you're gonna fight back against all this. Just consume less.
Right. And a good example is in this article. It talks about the Arctic and Exxon doing an Arctic development project with Russia, and of course, I'm sure they're backed out of that now with the war going on. But it said, as pressure mounted to stop drilling in the Arctic due to rapid glacial melting and other environmental impacts, Exxon fretted about a key project in Russia's far north and worked to decouple climate change and the Arctic. And one of the things that I bring up is, if we're not allowing development in Alaska and our territories touching the Arctic, Russia will. And same goes for Exxon. Exxon's now pulling out, Chevron pulling out of Russia, whatever projects they had in Russia. They had to move. Russia's not stopping. And that kind of goes back to why we need to pressure the major international players that are here, Exxon, Chevron, to, hey, do it right here. Let's set the standard here, because that Arctic is going to get explored, whether it's us,
whether you like it or not. Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Well, it's that's great feedback, great insight from you in California, Mike. So, Mike, let's do a little recap. What are your recap and go? What are your thoughts on this? I think. No, honestly, I'm actually enjoy kind of doing this, doing these on the daily basis. I think probably we could squeeze them down to 20 minutes, 15, 20-minute digestible things versus going to 30 minutes. But no, I'm digging these. I wouldn't mind. I think continuing these would probably be pretty impactful, important.
Yeah, I think, every morning I go through the LA Times, the San Diego Union Tribune, the Wall Street Journal. I'm doing this anyway, and it's helpful to talk about it. And if people gain something, if people gain something from it and they gain access to information that they don't subscribe to, I think that's a positive for whoever's following along. And I think it's a good exercise to just continually be sharpening your own mindset in energy, and hopefully it's helpful for people. Maybe they tune in every day, maybe they don't. And whatever happens.
I dig it. Well, I think continue, Mike. I dig it. You have a good weekend, and thank you everyone out there for tuning in. Again, check it out on YouTube, subscribe and all that stuff. And Mike, we'll talk about something in a little bit, but thanks for tuning in, everyone. For those of you tuning in, you were seeing a prop that we stopped, so Mike can go grab the prop.
This is kind of, I didn't know that something that was just getting started could already break.
It's oil specific, and people have pointed that out. Hey, Apple makes 20 billion or more a year in California.